My name is Ken Meyer, and I'm the Senior Career Advisor at the Office of University Advising and Career Development Center here at Eastern Michigan. And I'm here today because you guys took the Myers-Briggs. You took the Myers-Briggs Personality Indicator, and I'm here to talk with you a little bit about that and the results of that for you, and try to help you get a better idea of how important that can be. Now, I know you guys took it because you had to, and that's great. But you can learn some wonderful things from the results of the Myers-Briggs, and again, that's why I'm here. Now, I've been doing this roughly since 1985. I've been here at Eastern since 1985, so the only reason I tell you that is not to talk about myself, but you need to understand that what I'm telling you is the truth. I'm not going to give you any theory. I'm going to talk with you about what works, and I've done this so many times that I've had a chance to observe a lot. So hopefully this will be very helpful. So let me start off by giving you some idea of what personality is. I mean, why do this in the first place? Well, there's a couple reasons. My practice here at Eastern over the last 27 years has shown me that conservatively, about 70% of all the workers in the world end up going through their life hating what they do for a living. You may be coming from that environment. Your parents, your guardians, whatever your situation is, might be experiencing that. They may be experiencing a reality where they have to go to work every day and they don't like what they do. Now, there's honor in that. People do that. They do that all their lives, but it could be better. Some of us go to work every day and we end up loving what we do. Most of us who are in that situation did not have the benefit of the things you guys have already done, the stuff that you're about to learn. So that's another reason why I want you to understand what we're talking about here. So what is personality type? You've done this. Why did you do this other than an assignment? Personality type is made up of an instinctive preference for certain behaviors. You have behaviors that are just as naturally you, as comfortable, as optimal you as your right hand is over your left. And this is not a new idea. This is not something that we came up with. This is not some harebrained, ivory tower, cockamamie idea. People have seen the reality of what I just said, that personality is an instinctive preference for certain behaviors for almost 5,000 years. The professional researchers say they can go back and see the historical documents beyond the 4,000 year mark. And back then they would come up with descriptions such as earth, wind, fire, water. You're going to hear some terms such as sanguine, caloric, phlegmatic, melancholic. Those were all attempts by the ancients, people who lived thousands of years ago, to talk about what I just said and what you're about to see, that you have an instinctively preferred grouping of behaviors. Now, I'd like to do something to bring this home. I'd like you to take out a sheet of paper and get a pencil or a pen. I'm going to give you a few seconds to do that. Go ahead and do that now. Let's assume that they've done that. Okay, now you've got a paper or pen or a pencil. All I want you to do is to write on the back of it or write on the piece of paper, just write out your name. Just go ahead and write out your name. No one's going to see this. I'm not going to collect it. Just want to prove a little point here if I can. Go ahead and write out your name. Give you a couple seconds to do that. No big deal, right? Most of you did that. I appreciate it. Now I want you to do the same thing with your other hand. A little bit different. Just try it. Go ahead and do it. Typically at this point, I get a lot of rumblings. I've had some people swear at this point because this is a bit different. Go ahead and finish that. Okay, why was that different? Why was it different with the second hand? Why was it different the second time around? Anybody want to offer an answer? Here's the answer. You don't instinctively prefer the second one. You prefer the first one. And when you think about it, you've always preferred the first one. Some of you may be ambidextrous, but there are still some things in your life you prefer to do naturally without even thinking about it with one hand over the other. The only reason I bring this up is to show you a couple things. A, you already have instinctively preferred behaviors, and B, what you're about to see is that there is something going on psychologically exactly like this. Over 2,000 years ago, Hippocrates said, "Why do people keep using the same behaviors? Could it be instinctive?" Yes, it is. So we're going to take a look at what those are. So, as we've stated, personality is an instinctive preference for certain behaviors. There's 8 basic groups of behaviors, and really these groups of behaviors are labels for hundreds of behaviors. And while you may not use every possible behavior in each group, you are using all 8 groups. And here are the groups. The first group is where your energy is naturally coming from. We have extroverts and introverts. Extroversion, introversion. There they are. How are you psychologically energized? How do you get energized physically? It's either going to be from extroverted behaviors or introverted behaviors. We'll give you more detail about that in a couple minutes. Next level is how you become informed, how you made aware of everything that's going on around you every millisecond of your life. It's either going to be through sensing behaviors or intuitive behaviors. Sensing, intuition. You are literally seeing the world through one of these 2 lenses. You can't do both at the same time on any of these levels, but you will do both eventually, all 8 eventually. So we've got sensing, taking in awareness with our senses, taking in an awareness with the 6th sense of intuition. The third level of behavior is decision making. You could say that you're going to be making a decision at some point based upon awareness you got either as a sensor or as an intuit. You're going to make decisions with thinking, what we call thinking behaviors, and with what we call feeling behaviors. There's the feeling behavior. I have an affinity for feeling. We'll talk about that in a second. Again, you're going to be using these decision-making modes of thinking and feeling based upon the awareness that you've gleaned from sensing and intuition. The last tug of war is how you will set a lifestyle choice up for yourself, how you prefer to get things done with judging behaviors or perceiving behaviors. Judging and perceiving. Again, you're going to use both with an instinctive preference for one over the other. And I want to make sure you catch that. Even though, again, you're using all these behaviors, extroversion, introversion, sensing, intuition, thinking, my favorite feeling, judging, and perceiving, you're using all 8. You'll instinctively prefer one of every 2 on each of the 4 levels. And let's be clear about this. What I'm talking about when I use the word instinct is what we see now that the ancients wondered about forever. While you were literally being formed in the womb of your mother is when this happened. You were imprinted somehow to prefer one of 2 for a total of 4 of the 8 over this whole continuum. How it happens is the big debate. We're not going to talk about that today, but it definitely is in the womb. By the time you are born, in other words, your personality is blueprinted. Now, not sophisticated, not trained, not mature, but definitely blueprinted. Let's take a look at the energy level. Extroversion, introversion. How do you become energized? Think of a source of energy. I found it helpful over the years on this level to have my clients think of a source of food. So that's what I would like you to do right now. Are you naturally extroverted? Are you naturally introverted? Again, remember, you're going to use both. Well, when you get hungry later today, what are you going to do? You're going to find a source of food. What do extroverts do? Extroverts find people. Why is that? Well, it's because extroverts are energized by the physicality of other human beings. Introverts are not. Introverts are drained of energy. Every millisecond of the time, they're in the presence of another human being. Now, it may not necessarily be that egregious, but that's what's going on. Extroverts need people for every reason under the sun, including energy. Introverts need people for every reason under the sun except energy. And I'll get ahead of myself just a little bit. Extroverts are energized by the physicality of others. Introverts are energized just by thinking. I'm an introvert. All I got to do, and if you're an introvert, all you got to do is to start thinking about something and you're going to start getting a level of energy. The problem with introverts is that we're with someone else, it's kind of like taking energy off a dead battery or a half-dead battery. There's kind of a grinding thing. You're just not optimal. Okay? So, we're going to use both. If you're introverted, you will extrovert. If you're extrovert, you will introvert. Let's take a look at some more details on this. Since extroverts are energized simply by the physicality of others, these are people who are more naturally, and I'm going to emphasize that word hopefully on each of the remaining 3 levels. Extroverts are naturally talkative, naturally more social in a variety of levels. They just talk more. They're more comfortable with crowds. They're more comfortable with noise. They're more attracted to events and activities. They like meetings. Introverts don't like meetings. And the biggest reason is there's people there. There may be some other things, but that's the biggest reason. But extroverts, they like meetings. They're more comfortable talking to people they've never seen in their life. you're going to find that extroverts will interrupt you a lot. Real quick time out here. On the next level, you're going to find that intuits will interrupt too, but for a different reason. And I'll try to remember to let you know what that reason is. But extroverts will interrupt you simply because they're in your presence. They're getting some kind of energy charge, so they say just what they want to say. This is, instead of like, you know, ready, aim, fire, this is like ready, fire, fire, ready, fire, aim is what extroverts do. They're just very good at that. Everybody puts their foot in their mouth. Extroverts do it a lot more in clinical studies than introverts do. You should also know that based upon the data we get from the professional researchers, it's estimated that about 75% of the planet is extroverted. So if you are an extrovert, you're in a huge club. Let's talk about the introverts for a second. Introverts, as I said, get energized just by thinking about things. But for us to be optimal, we have to isolate. Because when we're with other people, there's a drain going on. Remember when I said that? There's an energy drain every time the introverted person, and I mean, introverts will do better with fewer people. And introverts will do better with people that we're comfortable with, that we love. We'll even seek that out, of course, but there's always an energy drain going on. It never stops until we isolate. When we isolate, we're getting optimal energy. So, how does that look like? What does that look like? We are more reserved, private, quiet, cautious, less risk-taking. As I mentioned before, don't like meetings. I mean, you know, if you've got friends, if you've got a roommate that doesn't want to go to the party, doesn't want to go to the game, doesn't want to go do whatever you all do these days, it might be partially because they're already at a low energy level. If they are at a low energy level, they just don't want to be with anybody. Nothing against you personally, they're introverted. And see, the thing about this, one of the things about this is that they don't understand it. Only 25% of the world is introverted. So what this sets up is a bias against introversion in every culture. Certainly if you're an American, you're supposed to be outgoing. You're supposed to be naturally social, naturally wanting to do all these things. And introverts, if they're at a low energy ebb, they just don't want to do it. And extroverts, they don't understand that. Because when they get at a low energy ebb, they naturally find people. So take a few minutes and think about this and see if you can figure out, and you're going to see your results pretty soon, but see if you can figure out, are you more naturally extroverted? Are you more naturally introverted? Remember, you will do both. The next level is how you're going to take in information, as the sensor or as the intuit. Now, first of all, there's one commonality here. Everybody uses their physical senses, and that's exactly what I'm talking about on this side for the sensor. Seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling. I mean, everybody starts that way instinctively. You wake up in the morning and you start to take in information. For the sensor, that is everything. For the intuit, it doesn't last very long, but it does serve a powerful purpose. We'll get there in a second. Let's talk about the sensors first. First of all, the sensing person truly, clinically, psychologically is someone who is more psychologically attuned to their five senses. So they are pretty much riveted at one thing at a time, riveted on one thing at a time. And this is behaviorally how you will see them being and wanting to be, because their body, if you will, is trying to take in all the details of everything that they see. So they're focused on what's happening to them right now, which makes them highly realistic. Their five senses are trying to get full or trying to get satiated, so this will make sensors highly, naturally, detail-oriented people. And all of this, of course, is compared to the intuits, and again, we'll get there in a second. It's also fun, I think, of course, I'm an intuitive person, so it's fun to observe this, but it's fun to note that sensors are sequential because of all the things we've talked about so far that sensors do. In other words, for the sensor, because of what their body is doing, they have to see issue 1 and then issue 2. They're not going to want to go to issue 2 until they've been satiated with issue 1. Heaven forbid if they've got to go from 1 to 5. Now they can do it. I'm not saying they can't do it, but they're working harder. Sensors are very sequential. First comes 1, then comes 2, then comes 3. Okay? That's what the sensors do. Sensors are also, because of this, highly commonsensical when compared to most intuits, much more naturally practical when compared to most intuits, very realistically focused to what's happening right now, will struggle with the concepts of the world, can certainly do conceptual things, but it's just making them work harder. And again, a huge club. The data specialists tell us about 75% of the planet are sensing. Well, that brings us to the intuitive people. I like to say that for the intuit, sensing is like gunpowder is for the bullet. it ignites, it gets the round going, but then it fades. So the intuit is going to, their senses are going to automatically get them going, but then they start to become aware because of what they think they are seeing, what they are intuiting, the sixth sense of intuition. Intuits are seeing concepts. We're reading between the lines, acting on hunches. Intuits are very, very good with vibrations. I know I already used the word, but the best word for the intuitive person is concepts. The intuitive thought is conceptual, roundabout, strategic, big picture oriented. Intuits are highly idealistic. Sensors are very realistic. Intuits are attracted to what's over the horizon. Sensors are bored by that, struggle with that, are riveted only to what's happening right now in front of them. That's what bores the intuit. The intuit is, it needs newness and freshness. When the intuit masters something, they've got to go on to something else. But only 25% of the world is truly that way. So take a couple seconds and try to figure out which one are you. Are you naturally sensing or naturally intuitive? Again, you'll use both. That's important to understand. Now we come to the third level, which is decision making. Now again, remember, you're going to take in information as the sensor and then the intuit, as the intuits do, and then at some point in time you will make a decision based on that awareness with thinking and feeling behaviors. So we have the thinking behaviors over here, and we have feeling over here, and the dichotomy between the two. Let's talk about the thinkers first. Thinkers are people who are reasoning with innate objectivity. So the first thing we can say over here is that the thinker is very objective. Another thing we can say is that because of this, thinkers are psychologically focused on logical inconsistencies. As a matter of fact, the key word that defines all thinkers, regardless of gender, I'm saying that on purpose, this is the only gender level in all of Myers-Briggs. The key word that defines all thinkers, regardless of gender, is logic. They are first and foremost eminently logical. What that means is they've got feelings. Remember, the feeling is over here. They've got feelings, but they're not using them to solve a problem. I want to make sure you heard that. Everybody on the face of the planet has got feelings. Thinkers don't use them to solve problems initially. It'll be secondarily. If life has trained them well enough, if they've had some kind of specific training where they use feelings as a criteria, your feelings, his feelings, her feelings, my feelings, whatever. Typically they won't. They'll do, what will they do? Pro and con, cause and effect, factual analysis. That's what the thinkers do, period, end of story. Then they draw their conclusions. Because of this, some of the things we see is that they're very aggressive in decision-making situations. The less harmony there is, the less harmonious options that are presented to the thinking decision maker in a decision-making situation is not that big of a deal for them. So they are very assertive, very aggressive. They like to argue. They like to debate. And I'm shaking my head no because I'm a feeler. It's hard for me to argue with anybody. I will. We'll get there in a second. Thinkers enjoy confrontation because feelings, how you feel about the confrontation and how they feel about the confrontation initially is not an issue. It's not the criteria. So they can be very upfront with you. They have an international reputation for being insensitive to the feelings of others around them. And what you must understand is that they are also insensitive to their own feelings during the time they're making a decision. Now, before and after they've made a decision, they can feel and they can talk about their feelings and it'll be some kind of criteria, but as a decision-making method, it does not enter in until they've already formed their decision in their mind, even if they didn't speak it. And what does this sound like? Which of the two genders does this sound like? This is what men do mostly, but not exclusively. The data tells us conservatively 65%, maybe as high as 71% of all the men in the world routinely test as thinkers. 25–30% of the females in the world, whatever it really is, test as thinkers. Most women, 70, minimally to 75% of all the females in the world routinely test as feelers. Some of the men in the world, I'm one of them, 25%, 30%, whatever it is, test as feelers. Here's what the feeling decision maker does regardless of gender. We are subjective in our decision making. What did the thinker do? Objectivity. What does the feeler do? We're subjective. The key word that defined the thinker was what? There it is, logic. The key word that defined the feeler is harmony. That's the first thing we're going to get a sense of, and many times the last thing we're going to get a sense of. I mean, we're able to be logical, but it's going to be secondary at best. The first thing we're going to do is have an instantaneous, harmonious understanding, we think, of what's going on. If it's too egregious, we don't want to make the decision. A lack of harmony does not bother the thinker. A lack of harmony can put us off. As a matter of fact, my favorite clinical question is on this level, and it goes like this. If the thinker believed that by telling you the truth you get your feelings hurt, you know what you're going to find? The thinker will tell you the truth just like that, and then be stunned on different levels that you got your feelings hurt, because it doesn't make any sense to them. If the feeler believed that by telling you the truth you would get your feelings hurt, you know what you're going to find? Feelers will tell you a lie. In clinical studies, time after time, most feelers will lie to you if it's too egregious. Now, I do it still occasionally at my advanced age because I'm a feeler, but it's typically to buy time, to try to get myself out of this, or try to make it more comfortable for you somehow. I might zing one out there, or remove myself from the equation. Clinically, feelers might zing one out there. We will tell you the truth, we will argue with you, we will debate with you, we will confront with you, but we don't want to because it hurts. And because it hurts, this is why we get our feelings hurt more easily. This is why we take most things personally. Because we're using our feelings all the time to make a decision. So we are more thin-skinned. We take most things first personally. We are seeing the harmony right off the bat. We are highly compassionate, highly empathetic. Don't start sending me emails. Thinkers are compassionate and empathetic too, but this has been studied. There's different degrees. Feelers are highly empathetic, highly compassionate. Which one are you? Are you more naturally the thinker or more naturally the feeler? It takes us down to the last level of ordering your day, facing your outside world, trying to get things done, naturally getting things done in a way that's optimal for you, the way that works for you, that is the most profitable for you. And I don't necessarily mean profitable in terms of money. We have the judgers over here, and we have the perceivers over here. Perceivers are not necessarily more perceptive than you or me. Well, they might be, but that's not what this term means. And the judger is not necessarily judgmental. The judger might be, but that's not what we're talking about. That has nothing to do with the Myers-Briggs lexicon. Here's what judgers are all about. Judgers are psychologically hardwired for closure, order, structure. Because of this, they're better with rules, timelines. That's one of my favorites for judgers. I'm a judger. Process, procedure, authority figures. There's a whole big list of them. Judgers actually will walk faster, have straighter posture. Now, I'm a judger. You can't tell that by me because I'm ancient, so don't use me as a physical comparison, but they do have straighter posture. Everybody is late. Judgers don't like it. We will physiologically feel uncomfortable if we're late. We're typically on time, if not early. Don't create much clutter anywhere. Have a tendency to dress more for the occasion. It's harder for the judger, believe it or not, to dress down. Now, everybody in college dresses down, but believe it or not, if the truth were known, the judges are having a harder time with that. And their dressing down will still be a bit more formal than the perceiving person might be. And this is a 50-50 thing, by the way. I've been talking about statistics throughout all of this. About 50% of the planet is judging when the data comes in. About 50% of the planet is perceiving. Let's talk about the perceivers for a second. Perceivers are psychologically hardwired, and I love this. I'm very envious of this. Perceivers are psychologically hardwired to wait and see what's going to happen. They're going to wait and see before they do anything. This makes someone very naturally flexible, spontaneous, my favorite, easygoing. Judgers, especially in critical situations that happen at the last minute, are not so easygoing because things aren't supposed to be that way psychologically for the judger. For the perceiver, that's the way life is, more easygoing. So I like to say the perceiver will swoop, they will dart. They probably one of the best things they do, one of their strongest characteristics is to do things at the last minute. I want to make sure you heard that. That's can be a highly refined skill. In our culture, it seems to be roundly criticized. But we've got data showing us that when the perceiver is doing something at the last minute, the stress and the pressure that they are experiencing is positive. It's actually healthy. Well, what about the judger? When the judger has to do something at the last minute, it's a negative situation. Now, the judger can be just as good functionally doing something at the last minute as the perceiver, but physiologically, we don't want that to happen. So if you ever get yourself in a position of authority, and you can identify who the perceivers are on your staff, make them the troubleshooters. Perceivers are natural troubleshooters. They're really, really good at it. Some more things about perceivers, and you're hearing this from a judger, so I can't be totally objective. This is clinical stuff. They walk slower, They slouch more. They procrastinate like crazy. They can be habitually late, but they are the best at doing things at the last minute. They're the most easygoing people you're going to find. And as I said, half the world is perceiving, half the world is judging. So take a look at that. Take a look at that data. See what you think, and we'll move on. I mentioned earlier this concept of dominant function, that you're going to take how you, the two behaviors of information intake, sensing and intuition, sensing, intuition, and then you're going to make decisions on that with thinking and feeling, and human beings will rank order how we use that. Now we do that by an unconscious allocation of psychic energy. I'm not trying to confuse you. As I said before, the reason this is important is one of these 4 functions is your dominant function, and it's different for the 16 types. I myself am a dominant intuit. So for my particular type, I'm what's known as a dominant intuit, auxiliary feeler, tertiary thinker, inferior sensor. Now, another way of looking at this is favorite thing to do is intuition, second favorite thing to do is feeling, third favorite thing to do is thinking, least favorite thing to do is taking in details and being realistically present in the moment. It's my inferior function. The dominant function is how you think. It's literally how you speak. Let me say that again. Whatever your dominant function is, and the packet of material you're going to get will show you, whatever your dominant function is literally how you speak. It's also how you think, because it's always getting the highest amount of conscious energy. So, if you have a job where, let's say, the dominant thought process is intuitive and you're a dominant intuit, that job is likely to be better. It's likely to be easier on several levels. If you're trying to relate to someone who is also a dominant intuit and you're a dominant intuit, that relationship has a great opportunity to be better. No guarantees, but has a great opportunity. By the same token, if you're trying to relate or talk or work or be social with someone whose dominant function is your inferior function, that relationship will be more difficult. Not impossible, not without its benefits, just more difficult. And that's really what I want you to take away. One of the greatest skills you can learn if you embrace type beyond career planning is that when you speak to people, if you can identify their dominant function or just take a wild guess, and you can start speaking to them in that function, they are getting more of what you're trying to say. It's like doing mirror image or body language, only you're doing it verbally. It's very powerful. Okay, you've got the results of your Myers-Briggs. You've had a few minutes and you're going to have more time to identify how accurate this was for you. And I may not have mentioned it before, but the Myers-Briggs carries about a 90% accuracy rate with it. So, you know, there's a real good chance that what you're looking at is who you are. If that's not the case for you, if you're in that 10% group, give me a holler. You've got my contact information. I'll be happy to go through it with you. What can you do at this point? One of the things you can do is take a look at the career report that's in front of you. Take a look at those 2 lists on the career report. The longest list is a list of from a database of about 500 to 600 careers. It's the top 50, non-categorized, in order, most naturally chosen careers by people of your personality type. Another way of putting it is, with some exceptions. And I'm saying that, with some exceptions. You are already psychologically pre-suited for most of those 50. Now, some of the work you would never think about doing, but a lot of it you might, and you're psychologically pre-suited for it because the behaviors that are used to get those job done at the core, you already instinctively prefer. The other list you're seeing on that page, the short list, represents the grouping of the bottom 20 careers. Careers that are chosen by people of your personality type, but frankly, very rarely. And when they are chosen, they can be mastered, but it's going to be a lot harder instinctively, a lot more obstacles to communication, and just about everything else you can think of. So that's something you can do from this point on. Once you start taking some of these jobs, there's a lot of resources you can use from taking jobs off these lists to figure out how the jobs are done. What I would encourage you to do is find the sheet in your packet that talks about career satisfaction characteristics. They're giving you the top 10 list of all the career satisfaction characteristics for your type. Learn those lists. However you get information about how jobs are done, filter that information through those lists, and you'll be being very honest and secure with your personality type. And remember, this is the most instinctive part of you. This is not going to change. You can trust it. It's a beginning point. I hope you have a lot of fun with it. If you need to contact me, just give me a holler. Bye now.